Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Darka Velazian, coming up in today's newscast. Lucy D., the mother of the two sisters murdered in last week's terror attack, was laid to rest alongside her daughters. A new report indicates that Iran used the guise of earthquake aid to Syria to smuggle weapons for its terror campaign against Israel. And join us for ILTV's Wine of the Week as we sit down with 1848 Winery. The nation of Israel mourned the death of terror victim Lucy D. less than 48 hours after the funeral of the D sisters in last week's terrorist shooting in the Jordan Valley. Thousands returned to Kfar Etzion cemetery near the D family home in Efrat to honor the memory of the family's mother who died in the hospital. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
Lucy's husband Leo and 3 surviving children were back in the Kfar Etzion cemetery, eulogizing their mother 2 days after burying sisters Maya and Rina. The 3 were shot and killed in an ambush by Palestinian gunmen who still remain at large. A manhunt is underway in northern Samaria. Maya and Rina died at the scene, while Lucy D. was critically injured in the shooting and died of her wounds at Beilinson Hospital on Monday. The family, who immigrated from the UK 9 years ago, hold dual citizenship. Karen D., 17, Lucy's oldest, spoke of the loss in the most personal of terms.
אתמול היה לקבר של מאיה ורינה, עצמתי את העיניים והתפללתי שתתעוררי. שלא נצטרך לעבור את הכאב הזה פעמיים. מה אם אמא לא תתעורר? באתי כבר את האחריות שלי, אני לא מסוגלת. אני לא מסוגלת להגיד גם אותה. הלב שלי כבר כל כך מלא בצער. אני משותקת מרוב הכאב. לאבד אימא זה כמו לאבד חיים.
Rabbi Leo D. poured out his heart to the warm embrace his family received from the people of Israel.
We literally traveled the world together. We made Aliyah together. We built a new life for ourselves in the Promised Land. You would frequently say that you couldn't imagine living anywhere else, nor could I, even now, especially now. What a warm embrace we felt from the people of Efrat, from Gush Etzion, from Israel, and worldwide.
Hours before the funeral, Lucy D.'s organs were donated and transplanted, saving the lives of 5 people. Her heart went to a 51-year-old woman, her liver to a 25-year-old man, and kidneys to 2 men. Lucy's lungs were transplanted into a 58-year-old woman. Her corneas were harvested and will go to recipients at a later date. Lucy D., of blessed memory.
And more on the aftermath of last week's terror attacks. The body of the Italian tourist killed in the Tel Aviv car ramming attack on Friday was flown back to Italy this week, just ahead of the Passover holiday. Alessandro Parini, the 35-year-old lawyer from Rome, was flown back to his home country in a coffin. Parini was on vacation in Israel when he was murdered by an Arab-Israeli terrorist who rammed his car at high speed into a group of people near Tel Aviv's boardwalk. 7 other tourists from Italy and the UK were also injured in the attack. His coffin, draped in the Italian flag, was transferred during an intimate ceremony at Ben Gurion International Airport in the presence of Italian Ambassador Sergio Barbanti and Israeli Foreign Ministry officials. The special flight was undertaken in collaboration between Menucha La'ad, an Israeli company that handles all treatment and international transfers of deceased, including victims of terrorism, the National Insurance Institute, and the Italian Embassy. His body arrived in Rome and was collected by his family. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke on Tuesday with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and offered his condolences on behalf of the people of Israel over the death of Parini, as well as the injuries sustained by 2 of his friends. According to the Prime Minister's office, the 2 leaders reiterated that Israel and Italy will continue to cooperate in the determined and uncompromising fight against terrorism. And joining us now with more on the global response to Palestinian terrorism and to anti-Semitism is human rights lawyer, author, filmmaker, and executive director of the Lawfare Project, Brooke Goldstein. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Brooke, the aftermath of the terror attacks continuing, and Israelis are still so astounded to see some of the coverage and responses to Palestinian terrorism. How have the past weeks or days' events been covered internationally compared with the reality we see here in Israel?
Really, everybody should be astounded at how terribly the reporting has been on these incidents. I think, in my opinion, the two worst offenders right now are both UK-based. The Guardian and the Times both published articles that whitewashed Palestinian Islamic terrorism, that are borderline historical revisionism. And in my opinion, these articles are aiding and abetting the genocidal attacks against the Jewish people, because what they're doing is they're justifying it. The Guardian was terrible in its reporting. Instead of saying that these two girls were killed, were murdered, they said they just simply died in a shooting incident, as though it's some lone wolf attack that came out of nowhere. Some stray bullet hit these girls instead of an intentional terrorist attack that was meant to kill two innocent young women, and also now their mother, who passed away out of Jew hatred, genocidal Jew hatred.
Now, you would think that the world would show solidarity with victims of terror, but instead we have seen, as you mentioned, skewed coverage, victim blaming. Why does this continue to be the case when it comes to Israel?
I think that the Jewish people need to wake up, because we are absolutely alone. The mainstream media has for quite some time justified terrorist attacks against Israelis, against Jewish people, because we are Jewish. You would think the world would be absolutely outraged at the fact that millions and millions of dollars, especially from the United States, from the United Nations, are going towards indoctrinating innocent Muslim children to become suicide bombers, to become child soldiers, to act as human shields. But of course they're not outraged, because as long as these innocent Muslim children are used to kill Jews, that is justifiable. And I think also we have to pay attention to what the United Nations Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese said, because it's quite significant. This woman is apparently a lawyer, and she came out with a statement saying that Israel, the Jewish people, have no legal right, no right in international law to defend themselves against terrorism. That is absolutely wrong. And it could not betray her anti-Semitism more. She could not show the world how deeply biased and anti-Semitic she is by making such a statement public, that Israel does not have a right to defend itself against terrorism. She is absolutely wrong. The most important thing I want to stress is for every viewer today to go to the Guardian and the Times UK social media, go on these articles and comment on the articles. Express how displeased you are and express your disgust at the historical revisionism that is taking place and the justification for murder. Because what these papers are doing, and what someone like Francesca Albanese is doing, is aiding and abetting the premeditated murder of innocent Jewish children, innocent Jewish women, innocent Jewish people, by covering up the indoctrination, the pay for slay, and by making excuses for genocidal terrorism. That is what is going on right now. And Jewish people, both in the diaspora and in Israel, need to wake up.
And you mentioned Francesca Albanese. There are now calls for her removal. But, you know, what can Israel as a country do to counter these false narratives and this hate that we're seeing today?
Well, first of all, absolutely, this woman, Francesca Albanese, must be removed. She has shown that she is not objective. In fact, the entire pseudo legal investigation against Israel needs to conclude, because the United Nations is not an objective party. Anyone with a brain knows that. Anyone can see how the United Nations is funding schools through its UNRWA program, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency program, which literally hires teachers off the Hamas payroll, Hamas being a designated terrorist group, which allows Hamas to come in and recruit children to become suicide bombers and child soldiers. If anything, the United Nations must be held legally accountable for its participation in genocidal terror. And frankly, I think what Israel needs to do is revoke the journalistic credentials of these so-called journalists who are just appalling in their violation of any types of journalistic standards when it comes to the reporting.
And Brooke Goldstein, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today about this important issue.
Thank you for covering this.